Welcome to Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning papers. Joining us, Miguel Delaney, who is Chief Football Writer at The Independent, and Riyadh Al Samurai, Chief Sports Feature Writer for the Daily Mail. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through some of the back page headlines. Are you for real in the Sun? We're going to talk a lot about Tyson Fury's retirement announcement and Nuno rap for Arne as Liverpool and Nottingham Forest prepare to do battle. In the Mail, City's leaving party. Kyle Walker wanting to depart, and apparently he's already had a bit of a do. In The Guardian, the next Scottish tennis star. Very good day indeed for Jacob Fernley in Australia. We're going to hear a great deal from him over the years, and more on Fury. The Telegraph, their front page, come on Andy, and this time it's Andy Murray in a coaching role getting fired up with Novak Djokovic, and more on the ongoing row at the Rugby Football Union about payment for executives. In the Times, unsung Scott stuns Kyrgios. That's more on Fernley. An extra time review for Cup. Much changes in the way the Cup is structured, and a hint that there might be another one with no extra time. And the Mirror. Once a blue, always a blue. David Moyes is back at Everton, and Slot says Nottingham Forest are buying their way to success. We'll come to most of that, but let's start with you, Riyadh Al Samurai, on the back page of The Sun. Are you for real? For Fury? Get it? Almost get it. Riyadh, the question is it for real this time? His third, at least third retirement announcement, maybe fourth.
OK, so I've counted 4, and for that reason, my answer is that there isn't enough salt in the world to take with these claims from Tyson Fury. No, I don't believe for a second that he's retired. As a little bit of sort of personal disclosure at the outset, I tend to struggle to believe a lot of what comes out of his mouth, and a big element of that's boxing. You're treated to have you tend to have a little bit of cynicism when they say anything, and with Tyson Fury, I'd multiply that by a factor of perhaps 100. And in this case, you have to take into account the context, which is that they are in very early talks to try and make a fight with Anthony Joshua. By positioning himself as retired, you would make the argument that his negotiating position gets improved enormously. Come and get me. What kind of sum of money are you going to put on the table? And really, in light of his previous with this, the number of times he has retired, I can't see any possibility beyond that. I think Eddie Hearn's on the same page as that. He's suggested it as well himself today. So it's really, for me, it feels very much like a play to get a greater sort of slice of the cake when that fight happens, if it ever happens. We have been talking about it for the better part of a decade. So, no one should be deluded into thinking this would ever happen quickly or easily. And I would also advise extreme caution against taking Tyson Fury at his word on this. I think, we go back to 2013. That was the first time he said he was going to retire. In 2016, and that was at a point when he was dealing with a huge number of mental health difficulties. He was also in the sort of throes of various sort of abuses around drugs and alcohol. There was also a doping charge in the background as well. And at that time, he retired. I believe that one lasted a few hours. There was another retirement in 2017. And then in 2022, after he fought Dillian White, he retired again. And by the close of the year, he was in a ring with Derek Chisora. So, until I start sort of seeing fairies down at the bottom of my garden, I'm going to perhaps keep a certain amount of cynicism on
Riyadh,
this one.
Call me naive. Is it possible that at the moment he thinks he's retired, irrespective of what's going to happen in the future?
No, I think that's incredibly generous. I think this is Tyson Fury playing Tyson Fury games. He is, let's be fair to him. This guy has been a tremendous boxer in the ring. But as I've written in a piece today, it's not a line I'm particularly proud of, but it does just come to mind. He is the undisputed master of nonsense and gobbledygook. I cannot take a word this man says almost at face value.
So you think he's been completely cynical?
I would say so.
All right, Miguel, do you disagree with anything that Riyadh says?
I think my sum of that is I'm glad I don't have to cover boxing day to day like that and the pantomime around that. And even as someone with a passing interest and a relatively general knowledge of Tyson Fury, I find it very hard to disagree with Riyadh.
OK, let's just have a look at The Guardian, who gives a little look at his legacy. I mean, let's not ignore the fact, Riyadh, and I hear everything you say, that he's produced some terrific boxing achievements, not least in that fight in Düsseldorf against Klitschko.
Absolutely, the fight against Klitschko was a masterclass. And I don't think anyone would, in their right mind, debate that Tyson Fury is a tremendous boxer, one of the great heavyweights of this era, and in fact several eras. Notwithstanding what's happened just recently with Alexander Usyk, but with Tyson, with Tyson Fury, when we talk about his legacy, it's incredibly complicated, it's incredibly messy, and it's how willingly we can separate what he's done inside the ring to some of the things he said outside of the ring. There have been a whole slew of appalling comments. There has been the backdated ban he received for testing positive for Nangelo. There have been questionable associations that he's made outside of the ring, and all of that will factor into the conversation we have about his legacy at such a point that this man has retired. I don't believe that point is today.
We shall see. Certainly, history suggests that he might not be retired long, but we shall see. Let's go back to The Sun, Miguel, on the left-hand side of their back page. The headline is Nuno rap for Arne. In a way, it's extraordinary that we're having a row between two top teams, Nottingham Forest and Liverpool. You didn't see that at the start of the season, and Arne Slot definitely didn't, from his reaction to what he saw as a big upset when Forest beat Liverpool at Anfield earlier this season. But the row now, if such it is about Slot saying Forest have spent their way to where they are.
Yeah, maybe worthy of some of the kind of boxing pantomime that Riyadh was talking about there. I was transfixed by what Riyadh was saying, and would have liked to hear more on it. On this, I suppose, it's a bit of spice before the game. The one thing that has to be said is when Arne Slot makes these comments, obviously stand out when you read them on the page or just hear the words. It's amazing how many times I've been in the situation of this season covering Arne Slot's press conferences, particularly after games. But he could say almost the most controversial thing in the world, but he just says it in such a kind of a jocular and affable way where it doesn't feel like anything at all. And it was a similar sort of thing today where kind of listening to the way he said it, and he made a specific point of mentioning Forest spending. I was actually surprised how he almost seemed to go out of his way to mention it, but he said it in that kind of way as if, no big deal, but this is just the reality. And yes, he did state that over the last 3 years, Nottingham Forest have spent more than Liverpool. And this is a subject, obviously, given the way football has gone over the past few years, the growth of big money, the economy, who spends what has become such a major issue. And let's not forget, of course, Forest did have points deduction last season for breaches of the profit and sustainability rules. And it's interesting, actually, because I've done a piece for tomorrow in The Independent about, where Forest are, how sustainable this is, how they've done it. And from seeking to speak to people in football, obviously there's praise for what Nuno's done. But some of it has felt a little bit, I don't want to say begrudging towards the club, but it's not, say, as effusive as the way people were speaking about Leicester a few years ago. And I do wonder, is that related to this issue maybe of how they've been spending? And I suppose, the numbers are there. In that time, in the period they've been in the Premier League, they have actually spent less than Liverpool. Now, to be fair, for Forest's part, especially in a world with restrictions. Their argument would be that the only way to actually compete with clubs like Liverpool is to invest. But then we're into a whole other big debate about who can invest when.
Indeed. And Riyadh, there's also obviously Arsenal actually still above Forest. And if you look at the back of the Times, the headline there, top right, don't rule out City, says Slot. Do you rule out Manchester City?
Yes. Look, I can completely understand the point of view that with Manchester City, we see year on year that they go on these remarkable runs where they become untouchable for 10, 11, 12 games in a row. And of course, that could happen. But from the starting point of how bad they've been at points this season, up until perhaps the last 3 games, one of which was against, a massive underdog in an FA Cup tie. So, yes, we are conditioned to think City can do it. It's January. They can go out and spend good money and improve that squad. But from the point where they are, what is it, 12 points back of Liverpool. Liverpool have got a game in hand. I can't make a reasonable argument for that. But at the same time, what else is Arne Slot going to say in that scenario? He's not going to be... He's clearly not a foolish man. He's not had a misstep since he's got to Liverpool. He's not going to turn around and say that Manchester City 4 titles in a row are a busted flush. They're completely finished. Let's forget about them this season. That would be, that would just be a very daft thing to do. So I can see why he's saying it. I just wouldn't necessarily choose to believe it myself.
Let's have a look at his new Merseyside managerial rival. David Moyes is on the back of the Mirror. Once a blue, always a blue is their headline, and he says that he's a better manager now than when he left. They do also say never go back, Miguel.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. He is a better manager, and there's a little bit of an interesting dynamic there. Johnny Northcroft had a really good piece in the Sunday Times yesterday about why Moyes went back. And he did mention about this sense of unfinished business, which I actually found quite striking because, and this is one of almost the unsaid things, even kind of when the surprise of when Sir Alex Ferguson essentially picked him or anointed him to be a successor at Manchester United. Even in 2013, there was that growing sense that maybe it had run its course at Everton, whereas clearly Moyes himself feels actually he could have done more and maybe kind of breached the top 4 more regularly with the club, taking them to the next level. That is driving him now. Obviously, I know Everton are at the other end of the table, but their entire future has been changed with the takeover and the new stadium. So many of the doubts of the last few years look mercifully to be dissipating. And Moyes also, I mean, to be fair, like in 2017, I was writing articles saying that Moyes' approach was gone. He was past it. That was like what happened at Sunderland. And then he comes back to West Ham, adapts, wins a trophy, and whatever about kind of the fair debate that West Ham fans would have about Moyes' style, it's difficult to argue with his results and his performance there. And he left there, I think, with his standing greatly improved, with a kind of almost this new hybrid approach to the game, especially in a football world that is quite different, actually, from when he left Everton. And it's quite intriguing to see what he's going to do. I mean, they still need a striker. That is a big thing. But, one of his strengths the first time was generating better performances out of players that weren't necessarily weren't necessarily seen as top level.
And in addition, the Telegraph headline on there, Moyes' story is bullish. Moyes eyes elite editions on his second coming, Riyadh.
Yeah, he said, I was impressed listening to what he said today. Obviously, there's a lot of elements of saying the right things. He wants to come out. He wants to sign new players. He wants to give fans something to shout about. He's also saying that, his message to the players is it's time to step up. So, he has sort of hit a few of the right notes today. But, it's incredibly... I wrote about this at the weekend, and, Everton as a club, I wasn't impressed with the way that they waved off Sean Dyche without a thank you. I thought that showed a lack of class on their part. Certainly under the previous regime, there's been a distinct lack of competence as well. But the future for Everton, they're going to be moving into an absolutely beautiful stadium. They're not going to stop investing now that they've got it. They are going to want to spend money, so as long as they can within the margins of PSR. So there's a lot to be excited about there. But when it comes to Moyes, I'm still kind of caught on something said a couple of weeks ago when he was sort of named in the honours list about not wanting to go and join a relegation struggler. And here he is at Everton, a relegation struggler. And you just wonder how much of this was on the wish list for him. And, you know, how in tune is he with what he's signed up to do? Now, he's a very intelligent, diligent guy. He's going to be aware, but there have been a lot of aspects of total dysfunction at Everton. There's going to be a lot to clean up. Sean Dyche was an extremely good manager, and this season has been absolutely woeful. That's not an accident, and that's not all on the manager. So it's a hell of a job he's got on there.
But it's not impossible, given that they got successive draws against Chelsea, Arsenal and Manchester City, having had a 4-0 victory before that. I'm just tossing that in there just to be contrary. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Mail. Kyle Walker's City leaving party. What's that about? You're watching Back Pages tonight. With us on this occasion, Miguel Delaney, Chief Football Writer at The Independent, and Riyadh Al-Samurai, who is Chief Sports Feature Writer for the Daily Mail. Let's go to your paper, Riyadh, and the back page headline, Walker's City leaving party. Definitely going then.
Well, it certainly seems that way if he's throwing a party. Obviously, there's been a bit more progress here. Sort of AC Milan interested in a move. Personally, I'd be a little bit sad to see him go. I've always enjoyed watching him play, but of course, it just feels like the right time. It's not been a good season for him. You know, within a failing Manchester City team, you have to make certain allowances. But for him personally, we've been saying this for weeks, months, even that, you know, an element of that pace seems to have gone, and with it, I think it's very hard with Kyle Walker to detach from the wider soap opera that gets discussed so much with his life. And it might also be one of those opportunities where getting out of the country just feels like the most sort of prudent option for him at this time. But I think should that come to pass, there's going to need to be a certain amount of recognition for just what a fantastic player he's been for a number of years here. We're talking about one of the best right backs of his era, and certainly within the Premier League conversation.
Yeah, and the exclusive story in the Mail suggests that a reason he wants to go is to get to 100 England caps, needs 7 more. Miguel, do you think going abroad is the best way to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, because when England played a qualifier against Ukraine last year, we were speaking about him and Gareth Southgate about this, and it was when Southgate revealed, actually, that he'd managed to talk Walker into staying on for 2 or 3 tournaments almost, and that Guardiola obviously has spoken himself about convincing Walker to stay in the past. And so it's interesting now that he's got so close, I suppose, he feels he may as well complete the job. And I mean, I suppose if they're having a party for him, it's testament to what a popular character he is in dressing rooms. He's like that when you speak to him. Although, on the broader sense, I have to say as well, I actually don't see why more players don't do this, especially when they're if they're towards the end of their career, or that they don't go for something as a bit different as an experience and seek to play in one of the great football countries and one of the great football clubs to really, I suppose, maximise that opportunity they have, especially when you've given a club the service that Kyle Walker has given Manchester City. Yeah,
it may indeed happen more, especially with Brits playing abroad just being more of a thing, so much more than it was 10 years ago. Let me look at the back of the Times extra time review for the Cup. Martin Ziegler saying that at the end of the season they won't bring back FA Cup replays, but they might scrap extra time and go straight to penalties. Miguel, what do you think?
I think this would be, on the whole, a positive step. It's funny, actually, as I was sitting there at Arsenal yesterday, and I think it was close to 0 degrees, and extra time started, a lot of journalist WhatsApp groups were talking about, can we not just go straight to penalties? Now, that's not why these decisions should be made. I think there is a broader argument, especially with a much more packed football calendar, as has been such a theme, about the merit of extending games like this, what they do to players' fitness, and also the bigger question, and how many extra times can you actually remember in the last few years that added to the spectacle or the game? I think it's really the only sort of thing that happens in tournaments. And there's always that sense of, like, I know people will point to the famous example of United 1999 against Arsenal, but generally there's a sense of clubs.
Liverpool, Chelsea in the League Cup final last season?
Well, I mean, but again, I think that's one of the rare examples. Maybe 2 Argentina games in the World Cup as well. I think we were actually discussing this yesterday, and I think on the whole, it's 3 and 4 occasions, maybe even more, that tend to be the sense of playing out these games. And also, I think specifically for the FA Cup, actually, it's a benefit there because I think it will add more jeopardy to the 90 minutes. Look, yesterday between Tamworth and Spurs, that game would have felt much more frantic towards the end if Spurs knew that rather than wear their Premier League fitness or being able to bring on better subs would make a difference with an extra time. Actually, it was going straight to penalty. So it would be a bit more of a leveler in the FA Cup. And obviously that has been engulfed by debate about meaning and whether as many upsets happen as much. So I think on the whole, both for fitness, for what it means for the football itself, for players' welfare, I think it would actually be a better step, at least in the FA Cup.
Do you agree, Rath?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree fully with that. I think extra time has got this habit of being very sterile. I think if you're Tamworth and you're looking up and Spurs are bringing Son off the bench, you're probably looking at saying, yeah, let's just get straight to penalties, please. I think that game's clearly changed with 3 goals in extra time. For me, it feels logical. It gets messy, doesn't it? Because when do you then reintroduce extra time? Because you're not gonna have that as a scenario that runs all the way through to the final. So look, it's not very neat, it's not very tidy, but it's something that would maintain a bit of a bit more excitement. I think it's a good thing. Clearly, it's a little bit artificial. We know that, but we're in the VAR era, so why not?
Andy Murray's method of creating extra time in his tennis career has been to become a coach to Novak Djokovic, which is in the front page of the Telegraph Sports Supplement. Come on, Andy. Chant you may have heard before. What do you make of this burgeoning partnership, Riyadh?
I love it. I find it absolutely fascinating because, look, with Djokovic, we can't kind of forget what stage he's at in his career. 37 years old. He's number 7 in the world. He's not where he used to be, and he clearly sees Andy Murray as someone who can help him bridge that gap. And I think it's a fabulous partnership. We saw it today. It wasn't a great first round for Djokovic. He gave Murray a little bit of his own medicine by having a few sort of slightly aggressive words towards his coaching team.
Yeah.
We've seen Murray dish that out plenty, but there's no one in the game, I think, who's better tactically or reading an opponent and finding a weakness than Andy Murray. So
it will be fascinating. It will, absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Miguel Delaney and Riyadh Al Samurai.